Turmeric was originally cultivated in the Old World tropics, but now thrives in other tropical regions around the world. Turmeric has large, dark green leaves that are erect and oblong. These leaves are pointed at the apex, broad near the base, and envelop the succeeding shoot. Turmeric is an herbaceous perennial plant of the ginger family and has bright orange rhizomes, which grow beneath the foliage. During the dry season, the stems and leaves dry up, and the rhizome remains dormant in the soil. Turmeric has a long history of being used for both food and medicine. It has been a major herb in Ayurvedic medicine for nearly 6,000 years. It has been used to purify the blood and to treat a number of illnesses, such as indigestion, liver and gallbladder diseases, arthritis, and rheumatism, as well as colds and flu. Raw turmeric applied to the skin is effective in treating inflammations, infections, bruises, and sprains. Since the discovery of turmeric's antioxidant phenolic compounds and the protection that these compounds provide against free radicals, this spice is now viewed as much more than just a food colorant or yellow dye. Turmeric's potential use in cancer prevention and the treatment of HIV infections is now the subject of intense laboratory and clinical research. Using turmeric in your food is a good way to prevent health problems. A small quantity of raw grated turmeric adds taste to salad dressings and gives them a bright orange color. Curry, which is made from turmeric and ginger, is another excellent seasoning that provides preventative health care maintenance. Turmeric tea is also beneficial for the restoration of the liver and the gallbladder and aids in reducing inflammation and swelling and arthritis. Turmeric is easy to grow in the home garden and will produce sufficient quantities of roots for salad dressings, homemade curries, and medicinal use. You can use fresh roots from the markets for planting, or perhaps from your neighbors. Plant the roots superficially in the soil during April and May. Keep the area free of weeds during the following months, and later in the dry season, turmeric can be harvested for home use.
Following flax and wheatgrass, turmeric is the third best-selling botanical dietary supplement, racking up $12 million in sales and increasing at a rate of about 20%. Curcumin is a natural plant product extracted from turmeric root, used commonly as a food additive, popular for its pleasant mild aroma and exotic yellow color, considered unlikely to cause side effects. Just because something is natural, though, doesn't necessarily mean it's not toxic. Strychnine is natural, cyanide is natural, lead, mercury, and plutonium are all elements. Can't get more natural than that. But turmeric is just a plant. Plants can't be dangerous. Tell that to Socrates. In considering the validity of the widely accepted notion that complementary and alternative medicine is a safer approach to therapy, we must remind ourselves and our patients that a therapy that exerts a biological effect is, by definition, a drug and can have toxicity. It cannot be assumed that diet-derived agents will be innocuous when administered as pharmaceutical formulations at doses likely to exceed those consumed in the diet. Traditional Indian diets may include as much as a teaspoon of turmeric a day, which is the equivalent of about this much fresh turmeric root. If you look at the doses of turmeric that have been used in human studies, they range from less than a 1/16th of a teaspoon a day up to about 2 tablespoons a day for over a month, whereas the curcumin trials have used up to the amount found in cups of the spice, around 100 times more than what curry lovers have been eating for centuries. Still, without overt serious side effects in the short term at least, but if you combine both high-dose curcumin with black pepper for that 2,000% bioavailability boost, that could be like consuming the equivalent of 29 cups of turmeric a day. That kind of intake could bring peak blood levels up around here, where you start seeing some significant DNA damage, in vitro at least. So just incorporating turmeric into our cooking may be better than taking curcumin supplements, particularly during pregnancy. The only other contraindication cited in the most recent review was the potential to trigger gallbladder pain in people with gallstones. If anything, curcumin may help protect liver function and help prevent gallstones by acting as a cholecystokinetic agent, meaning it facilitates the pumping action of the gallbladder to keep the bile from stagnating. In this study, they gave people a small dose of curcumin, about the amount found like a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric, and using ultrasound, were able to visualize the gallbladder squeezing down in response, with an average change in volume about 29%. Optimally, though, you'd want to squeeze it in half, so they repeated the experiment with different doses, and it took about 40 milligrams to get a 50% contraction. That's about 1/3 of a teaspoon of turmeric every day. On one hand, that's great, totally doable. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, wow, that's some incredibly powerful stuff. What if you had a gallbladder obstruction? If you had a stone blocking your bile duct, and you eat something like that makes your gallbladder squeeze down that hard, it could hurt. So patients with biliary tract obstruction should be careful about consuming curcumin. But for everybody else, these results suggest that curcumin can effectively induce the gallbladder to empty, and thereby reduce the risk of gallstone formation in the first place, and ultimately perhaps even gallbladder cancer. Too much turmeric, though, may increase the risk of kidney stones. As I mentioned in a previous video, turmeric is high in soluble oxalates, which combine to calcium form insoluble calcium oxalate, which is responsible for approximately 3/4 of all kidney stones. So the consumption of even moderate amounts of turmeric would not be recommended for people with a tendency to form kidney stones. Such folks should restrict the consumption of total dietary oxalate to less than 40–50 milligrams a day, which means no more than at most a teaspoon of turmeric. So for example, those with gout are, by definition, it appears, at high risk for kidney stones, and so if their doctor wanted to treat gout inflammation with high-dose turmeric, then that's where curcumin supplements might come into play, because to reach high levels of curcumin in turmeric form would incur too much of an oxalate load. If one is prescribed a supplement, how do you choose? The latest review recommends purchasing from Western suppliers that follow recommended good manufacturing practices, which may decrease the likelihood of our buying an adulterated product. This landmark study, comparing the ability of different spices to suppress inflammation, also compared their ability to protect DNA. Cloves, ginger, rosemary, and turmeric were able to significantly stifle the inflammatory response, but what about DNA protection? If you take a tissue sample from some random person, around 7% of their cells may show evidence of DNA damage, actual breaks in the strands of their DNA. And if you blast those cells with free radicals, you can bring that number up to 10%. But if the person had been eating ginger for a week, that drops to just 8%. This is from a tissue sample taken from someone who hadn't been eating any herbs and spices, and as a result their cells were vulnerable to DNA damage from oxidative stress. But just including ginger in our diet may cut that damage 25%, and same with rosemary. But check out turmeric. DNA damage cut in half. Again, this is not just mixing turmeric with cells in some petri dish. This is comparing what happens when you expose the cells of spice eaters versus the cells of non-spice eaters to free radicals and just sit back and count DNA fracture rates. And not only did the turmeric work significantly better, but a significantly smaller dose. This is comparing about 1 1/3 teaspoons a day of ginger or rosemary to practically just a pinch of turmeric, about 1/8 of a teaspoon a day. That's how powerful the stuff is. So I encourage everyone to cook with this wonderful spice. Tastes great and may protect our cells in our body, with or without the added stress. If you just count DNA breaks in people's cells before and after a week of spices without the free radical blast, we see no significant intrinsic protection in the ginger or rosemary groups. But the turmeric group still appeared to reduce DNA damage by half. This may be because curcumin is not just itself an antioxidant, but boosts the activity of our own antioxidant enzymes. Catalase is one of the most active enzymes of the body. Each one can detoxify millions of free radicals per second. And if you consume the equivalent of about 3/4 of a teaspoon of turmeric a day, the activity of this enzyme in our bloodstream gets boosted 75%. Now, why do I suggest cooking with it rather than just throwing it in a smoothie? Well, this effect was found specifically for heat-treated turmeric. Because in practice many herbs and spices are only consumed after cooking, they tested both turmeric and oregano in both raw and quote-unquote cooked forms. In terms of DNA damage, the results from raw turmeric did not reach statistical significance, though the opposite was found for the anti-inflammatory effects. So maybe we should eat it both ways. Practical recommendations for obtaining curcumin in the diet might be to add turmeric to sweet dishes containing cinnamon and ginger. I add it to my pumpkin pie smoothies, which are otherwise just a can of pumpkin, frozen cranberries, pitted dates, pumpkin pie spice, and some non-dairy milk. And also cook with curry powder or turmeric itself. They also suggest something called turmeric milk, which is evidently a traditional Indian elixir made with milk, turmeric powder, and sugar. I'd suggest substituting a healthier sweetener and a healthier milk. Soy milk, for example, might have a double benefit. If you're taking the turmeric to combat inflammation, compared to dairy protein, osteoarthritis sufferers randomized to soy protein ended up with significantly improved joint range of motion.